Hey Mike, how's it going, man?
Good, and you, Alexis?
Doing great, man. I apologize for being a little bit late.
All good, brother. All good. I won't keep you for too long. Just want to get into the new album and the show. And first, want to start with by firing up the DeLorean and go back in time for a few, if you don't mind.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, we got to hit 88 miles an hour though.
yeah, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. It's been a long time coming. Actually, 3 years in the making for me to get to talk to you. I
Under-
was I was on my way to the observatory back on March 13th of 2020 for the kickoff of the Meta X tour.
Hell yeah.
Whole world shut down.
The greatest tour that never happened.
Exactly. So wanted to go back to rewind to that place in time. I know finding out that day and being crushed, but take me back. Where were you? Were you guys already in Orange County at that point by the
No,
time
no.
the show got
So we had just played 28 dates in Europe, flew back the week before. So we were in Europe for February of 2020. The only date that we even missed was in Italy, where ground zero of COVID was in Milan. And we were like, oh, that's a bummer. Didn't really think that much about it. I sort of make it akin to the idea that it's like we were skiing down a mountain. There was an avalanche behind us. We had no idea there was an avalanche. That's how fast we were going. So we come back. We're excited to kick off this tour. Had the bus, everything ready to go, the lighting package, the crew, all the merch. And this is the middle of March. My birthday's on March 17th. I'm like, oh, we're
uh,
gonna celebrate my birthday on tour. This is gonna be awesome. And then everyone's like, man, are you guys gonna go out? We're not sure like how serious this is. I was like, no, we're going out. And then I'll never forget the canary in the coal mine was the NBA season was canceled. And I go, well, I don't think they just cancel entire seasons of the NBA. Maybe this is more serious than everyone thought. And lo and behold, we get the call from our management and Live Nation that the tour is shut down, everything is canceled to further notice. And that's when I was like, okay, what do we do now? Which is funny because that leads us into the idea of I guess we write another record because it didn't seem like we wanted to sit around and just hope and wait for things to turn normal because it didn't seem like there was much light at the end of the tunnel during that moment.
yeah, that's what I was going to ask. How quickly did you give yourself a little bit of a vacation coming out home from Europe? Where you're like, no music for a month, and then we'll get to it, or was it like, no, I want to keep the wheels turning right away?
I mean, I did not want to write another record. We just put out a record. We finished a record we were put out in 2019. And the idea of like being on album, touring cycle. And, sometimes I think that writing an album is a lot of work, but the fruits of your labor are touring it. So I was
Yeah.
very excited to tour the record and, in a great headspace about that. And the idea of going, no, you got to write another record. I was like, what the hell do I even write a record about? I just wrote a record. And it felt like the things I talked about in Metawar were like coming to pass in that time. So I didn't really have, the brain in my head of like, oh, I have all these ideas and all this like stuff to say. I felt like I just said it all. So I think in terms of our duration of time to actually write a record, that's where it was like, hey, what if we just like go out to the desert and maybe we can trick the record label into getting a house for us, which we somehow did. And we all just moved out of LA and moved out to Joshua Tree. And like we didn't even write anything for like 6 months. Like I'll never forget, like the label was like, hey, when can we hear stuff? I was like, we're working on stuff. They're like, when can we hear it? I'm like, we didn't even like pick up an instrument. We were just like grilling, hanging out, shooting guns, just like, getting into just like sort of like, I don't know. It was like a bonding experience for the first 6 months of just like trying to get back to an earlier form of the band of just like having a good time together. And then that sort of eventually, you do enough mushrooms, a little bit of LSD, you're out in the desert, new ideas start forming, new perspectives, a sense of feeling like you were off world, looking back at a world unraveling. It was it created, I think, a little bit of a spacier album for us. But what I did is I put together like this big concept deck of like everything I wanted to write about in the album and sent that off to the label and they loved it. So that bought us more time instead of being like, what the hell are you guys doing out there? I sent them this thing and like, oh, this is really cool. When can we hear it? And I'm like, good question. But at least we bought some time there and, had some really cool collaborations involved in this record with Mick Gordon from
Yeah.
obviously scored Doom Eternal, which, we're a huge fan of. That was actually a piece of COVID serendipity too, whereas I mentioned we ended up having to skip our Milan date, which gave us an extra day off in Frankfurt, Germany. I know people that work at the Bethesda Gaming Works office in Frankfurt, and we ended up getting to play the new Doom there before it came out. So we're hanging out. One of the community managers, who's a friend of mine over there, really cool German girl, was like, I was like, wouldn't it be really cool if we did something with Mick Gordon? And she goes, well, I'll give you his email if you don't tell anyone that I gave it to you.
Oh,
So I store it in my phone, don't think twice about it. Fast forward to like, 5, 6 months later, we're out in the desert, grilling some steaks, drinking some whiskey, listening to some Mick Gordon stuff as a reference. And I go, oh, I actually have his email. I totally forgot about that from when we were in Germany. I go, should I just email this guy right now, like out of the blue, and just see what happens? And everyone's like, why not? You know what I mean? Like, what's the worst he's going to do? He's not going to respond. Maybe he does respond and says, hey, that's really cool. It's not really something I'm interested in doing. He responds back in like 15 minutes and like,
oh
oh my
wow.
God, like what a trip. So cool to see your name pop up in my inbox. I'm a huge fan. Would love to do something together. And I think that's a lesson, kids. Shoot your shot. You never know what's going to happen. And next thing you know, we're collaborating with Mick Gordon as a sort of co-producer on the record, which, obviously it was not something we could do in person. He was in Australia. They were on heavy lockdown as well. So it was a lot of Zooming at strange hours, which everyone was sort of doing, but that was really cool. And it was awesome to collaborate with someone that you're such a huge fan of. And I think that guy's a genius in general, to be honest.
Yeah, I was certainly going to get into the Mick Gordon and certainly the other guest appearance, if you will, horror pitching in again on a tune.
Yeah, I mean those guys. We lived on a bus with them for a few months and toured in 2018 when we did some music. So we're like family already. And like when we were out there, living in this big house, everyone was having like a lot of FOMO because like we were posting like that we were having this great time during lockdown. We're out in the desert, we're four-wheeling, we're climbing, we're doing all this stuff that people are like, man, I'm just like stuck in my apartment, and these guys are out there living it up. And I almost felt a little bad sharing that because I got to be honest, I think I had one of the best times of my life that summer of lockdown. It was just so much fun out there, but I felt a little bad sharing it. But anyways, those guys they hit us up, and I was like, "Yo, just come out and stay with us for a bit, and we'll sort of like maybe like make some music together, whatever." That wasn't even really the goal, but we did, and we just like tracked some cool stuff. We actually tracked quite a few things as we were just like hanging out, coming to some ideas, and Paralyze was one of them that felt like it should be on the record. And again, those guys are just so easy to work with, and our workflow is always great, and just like it happens quick. And you never know. Sometimes when you like put two different sort of like entities in a studio, it can just be tough. But like those guys, it's easy.
And then who was the one? How many mushrooms deep were you before someone yelled out, "Let's do a Tears for Fears cover"?
That was funny. We had been playing with that idea for a while. We just all loved that song, and I think it made it harder to cover because we liked the song so much. It's such a good song that you don't want to do it a disservice. So you try and figure out ways to do your version of it. And when I say that we did 6 different versions of it
Oh
before
wow.
that version, I am not kidding. We tried it at every tempo, different drum grooves, like, oh, what if you sing it this way? What if you do it that way? And it was tough, man. Like we almost just quit on it. And then finally we happened on one that we are like, I think this works. But yeah, it also just seemed fitting with where the state of the world was at the time to sort of reboot that and the message that comes along with that song.
I love it, man, because you make it kind of dark and gloomy, but there's still that like brightness in there. There's still that melody that gives it that brightness. And it's such a great, the original and your version, such a like windows down driving song for.
And we pay homage to the original melody and like the bridge, do you know what I mean? But yeah,
Yeah.
we definitely like, we switched everything from like, major to minor. Like we gave it a darkness, do you know what I mean? Like we want it, and that's sort of what we tend to do. Or you take a song that maybe has like menacing lyrics that like is an otherwise bright song. We did it with Pumped Up Kicks, but then when you sort of give it a darker context, you end up like hearing how dark the lyrics actually are. So
Yeah. I like that juxtaposition on it, man.
yeah, totally. It was fun.
And now we've got the one show, the
Show.
Uno show coming up at the
Yeah.
Teragram Ballroom, downtown LA on the 29th. Any support bands, or is it an evening with?
No, it's definitely, we've got support. We've got it's very much so like a family affair of like, Sean Beavan, who's a great mixer, from and producer and collaborator from bands like Nine Inch Nails to, Guns N' Roses to Slayer to Marilyn Manson. He's mixed a lot of our records. including a bunch of this. You know, we had actually 2 different people mixing on this record, but and he's got a great music project called 8mm. So he will be opening up the show.
Ah,
He'll also be front of house mixing our show, which he's new front of house for like 9 Inch Nail in the 90s. He's the GOAT. He's awesome.
wow.
So having Sean, who mixed our record, doing front of house, that's not something we would generally have just because Sean's not going out on tour. But to have that is going to be the best mix show ever for us. So that's exciting. And then after that, we've got Tim Scold, his project
Oh,
Scold.
yeah.
You know, huge fan of Tim. He's a good friend of mine. We spend a lot of time on a shooting range together. He's an awesome guy. And then we've got a really cool project called Straight Razor, which is a gentleman by the name of Omar Doom, which you might remember if you've seen Inglorious Bastards, the gentleman who does the Dominic DeCoco, the sort of Italian gesture hands. So he's got a really cool sort of dark electronic music project, and he'll be playing. And then of course us. So we've got it's all the homies. It's a big family affair. The show's like 90% sold out. So if you do have interest coming, do not sleep on those tickets. Get them now. They're probably going to go in the next week or so, as the show is 3 weeks out or something like that.
And then is this going to be like an album release party? Going to play the album, or is it just going to be a normal show?
No, it's a little, you're going to get a little bit of everything. You're going to get a lot of NINDEX, but because we have the entire venue or now, we're going to play an extended set. We're going to play a little bit of every album.
Nice.
But it will be in many ways a return to form. We have not been on stage in 2 years. We went out with Cradle of Filth, and that tour got canceled in the middle because we all actually got COVID that time. And then, ever since that, we really just kind of hunkered down to finish up this record and have not been like in a huge rush to get back to it because we want to do it right. We want to rebuild a better show and create a sort of better spectacle and sort of revamp some of the theater performance of what we do. And I think that people will have a great time. It's going to be an awesome show. If you can make it, I would highly recommend going.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to popping my cherry. This is 3+ years in the making for me to finally see it. And interestingly enough, I remember when Mike Gitter first signed you guys and he was telling me about you, and he was like, no, this is a real industrial metal band. Like, thank God for it being, because it's been lacking for a long time. So big fan.
And shout out to Mike Gitter for all the sort of infinite support we've got from him. I talked to that guy like, he's my girlfriend. I talk to him 3 times a week or something. He's great. He's really helped us navigate a lot of stuff. And he's a person that, one of those rare anomalies in the music industry that actually cares about culture and cares about bands. He's out at every show. He's just a real solid human.
Yeah. Love the guy. Love the guy. Speaking of shows and looking ahead, rad to see that you guys are going to be on Sick New World.
Yeah, no,
up in the new year.
Us and every other band, apparently. I don't know how they're going to pull it all off in one day, but man, that's a hell of a lineup. And I think that's super cool. And we're excited to be part of it. And, I just love how that sort of aesthetic and sound is really sort of making a return to popularity, which is cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting festival. I mean, it's like half new metal and half industrial.
Yeah, no,
a little bit of both.
There's a good sort of Venn diagram there of like, sort of crossover between those sounds that have shared some aesthetic and shared some sort of sonic texture and stuff like that. So to me, it makes a ton of sense.
When you play a bill like that, are you like circling the calendar and going, oh, I can't wait to see, V&V Nation or Frontline or.
Absolutely. To me, those things are as much about like, being a fan of all the other bands as well as like, trying to bring up the best show as possible. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
And Danny Elfman,
man, that dude is, just a wellspring of creativity. I don't think like anyone is operating on that guy's level of genius, to be totally honest.
I love that he's out there making or playing music again live.
He's out there and he's looking like, I don't know. He's very muscle bound. He's looking like he's in great shape. He's definitely, he's doing it for sure.
That would be a hell of a cover. 3Teeth doing a Boingo song.
I mean, could you imagine, dude? That would be sick. Ooh. I think we could do that. I think we could pull that off.
No One Lives Forever. I don't know.
Yeah, we could definitely pull that off. We'll put that in the back pocket for later.
Just plant that seed. Dude, I could really use your help in debate. Speaking of being music fans, because that's ultimately what we are. You're a music fan with what you do. I'm a music fan. So I need you to help me out on a little household music debate I got going on. Me and my wife are debating. We're both big 9 Inch Nails fans. Who isn't, right? But we're debating the best album. album 1, Pretty Hate Machine, versus album 2, The Downward Spiral. If you had to pick out of those two, which one would be your numero uno?
I mean, that's such a tough thing to decide on. In terms of what had the more impact on me, because one is more synth pop. Do you know what I mean? Like you're gonna get, if you're into a little bit more of like a synth pop, sort of like dark industrial record, but then you have like this like really intense sort of like nihilistic dark thing that happened in Downward Spiral that had a much greater effect on me and my influence. So I have to go with Downward Spiral, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know. I hate to have to decide there, but you know, that guy is just so prolific. We oftentimes find ourselves writing in the studio where you come up with a cool line or someone's like, oh, check this out. And we're like, that's so cool. And then we listen to it and you're like, oh, that's because it's like a Nine Inch Nails thing. Never mind, we can't do that. But it's like to try and navigate around the fact that that guy's done everything, and everything you kind of go, oh, damn, like he took all the cool stuff first. So yeah, shout out to Trent Reznor for just being the GOAT, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. Downward Spiral, and certainly you have to look at the time frame. I mean, 88 versus 94. There was certainly more technology for him to play with by the time the second album came out. But I just felt like the second album was much more of a complete story. It felt like a soundtrack almost to a movie. It was very cinematic, and there were ebbs and flows and ups and downs, and brutally heavy for like the mid 90s when guitar wasn't cool.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you know, it's funny because I think the Broken EP is arguably more pissed than either of those.
Of course,
You know,
of course.
if you listen to like that song Last on like, you know, that EP, like that's an angry guy. You know what I mean? Like that dude is pissed. And if you learn some of the story that surrounds that stuff. So yeah, I love very angry Trent, you know.
Need him to get back to being a little bit angrier if he could.
Yeah. I mean, he's got a pretty sweet life, so it's tough to be angry when everything's going so good, but he put in the good angry years that we can all still enjoy.
Just to put a button on Nine Inch Nails, do you have a favorite Nine Inch Nails song we could play for you?
I'm gonna go ahead and say Last. To me, like that has to be, you know, a huge inspiration for what we did sonically. Some of the really simple, just like kick boom drum patterns in it. It's just like, to me, there is no fat on that song.
No, and you're right about the EP. I mean, the EP is the greatest of all time. But talking albums, I mean, what is it, 4, 5, 6 songs on the EP? So taking albums into consideration.
Yeah, album cohesive sort of bodies of work. I think, you know, Downward Spiral, The Fragile, like they're just, you know, chef's kiss. They're just perfect. You know? Yeah.
Dude, one other band I got to hit you up about, because we're an old school radio station. We do a feature every night called Mandatory Metallica that you're going to be a part of. Matt, you're a Metallica fan?
Of course. How are you not a Metallica fan?
Okay.
Like, I mean, like, well, I grew up in the 90s. Like I drive around in my truck. I still listen to Ride the Lightning. You know what I mean? Like the early Metallica albums for me are some of the best, just pound for pound metal songs ever written. You know?
Okay. So then one more album debate. Same thing. Debating the greatest Metallica album, and it's come down to Ride the Lightning versus Master of Puppets.
I like Ride the Lightning better.
Ooh.
Really, just because I had that cassette first. It was a white cassette. I remember it perfectly. It was something that for me, like, had a profound effect on my little child brain at the time. So I just think for me, it's like, it's more comfort food. Obviously Master's an amazing record. But I think some of the rawness of the vocals, like I think the vocals were just seething on that record. They had this like really cool sort of like mid-range high, just sort of like snarl to it that I love, you know.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's definitely more dirtier. Almost sounds like it's recorded in the bathroom or something.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
I lean a little bit more Master because the same thing. It's a little bit more of a complete sound spectrum. You got Orion, you got Battery. You know,
was Cliff on Master?
Yeah, that's his last album. I mean, Orion is his baby, man. That whole instrumental.
Yeah. That's phenomenal. I mean, it's like just to side with one of those is really tough, you know. Also, I gotta be honest, I think I like the album art better for Ride the Lightning.
Yeah, you know what? When I bring up that question, someone recently brought that up. If you had to go album art,
yeah,
I'd go Ride the Lightning. But
yeah, I think it's iconic. Not that Master isn't, but like, you know, I just feel like it's just super cool to me. You know?
And then lastly, name a Metallica song for us to play for you on Mandatory Metallica.
Fight Fire with Fire.
Love it, man. We'll rock that. The opening track of Ride the Lightning.
Hell yeah. Dope, man.
Beautiful, man. Thank you so much for the time. Glad to finally get to talk to you. 3+ years in the making, and can't wait for the show later on this month.
Hell yeah, brother. Appreciate the airtime today.
Thanks. Have a good one.
No
Bye-bye.
problem. Peace.